Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Business in Bentonville. My name is Andy Wilson, and I'm the executive director. And I will tell you, since we started doing business in Bentonville, there's one other thing that I've always been passionate about, and that is leadership. And I will tell you today, you're a part of something really, really special because we're about to launch a segment on servant leadership. Now, you're going to have to hold on because this is about to get really great because I'm about to introduce my guest today, Celia Swanson. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Andy. It's my pleasure and honor.
Oh, my goodness. Celia, I can't believe I'm sitting across from you all those years at Walmart together.
Where we sat across other tables.
We did. And this is going to be, I think, a much more pleasant conversation than some of them. I shouldn't say that, right?
It's all good. But yes.
Oh, Celia, thank you so much. It's such an honor to have you on our podcast today as we, when I began to think about this whole servant leadership, I made a list of people that had such impacts on my life. And Celia, you're one of those people.
Thank you.
I tell you, I've admired you. I've got to work with you. And now we get to work together again.
No.
Or I don't know if this is work. I think we're just going to enjoy each other, right?
Exactly right.
So we're going to talk a lot about this podcast on servant leadership. And today, though, we're going to give you a bit of an overview of where Celia and I are going to go with this.
Right.
And then we'll get into that. But first of all, Celia, we've got to tell everybody about you. And of course, you spent 26 years at Walmart, right?
That's right. Yes.
Oh my, that's good. That's where I was. I was along in that period. And now, Celia, tell us about you, okay? Because I want people to know you. And of course, they can check you out on LinkedIn and all that other, but you tell us about you, okay?
Well, I spent 40 years in retailing. My entire career was working first in department stores. Then I transitioned into the club channel with Pace Membership Warehouse, and that was in Denver. And I was there 5 years, and then Sam's Club bought the Pace clubs, and I did not think I was going to be in Bentonville, Arkansas. I'd made it to Denver, Colorado. I'm like, why would I ever go to Bentonville, Arkansas? And I was married to a very wise man who said, if you're going to stay in retail, why wouldn't you go to Walmart and Sam's Club?
Right.
And so I came on my first visit, and, it was on a twin prop jet, right? And we landed in Drake Field in Fayetteville, and it was 50-50 shot if you would actually land in Fayetteville, and I didn't know any of that.
Those are horrible memories. You're right.
And I got the last rental car, and I drove to Bentonville, and I was, put up in a motel, and I'm like, there's no way. And then the next morning, I went into the Sam's Club offices, and I met the people, and the culture was amazing. And I was shocked that by the end of the weekend, I said, where do I sign?
I love it.
That's how I got here.
Well, I know it. So, and so, that story is so similar with so many of us back in the day, especially that's exactly what happened. And when we met the people, we said, where do we sign? Because we knew something was special about that culture, didn't we?
Right. Exactly right.
And, we're going to get into a lot of those kind of things on this podcast. But I think, it's so important about this podcast that we're going to do around servant leadership is that we've been there. We have learned from some of the best. We have been able to execute that individually with wonderful people that we were able to be around and lead. Yeah. And we'll get into that. Now, so let's continue about your career because you have a very successful career at Walmart. So
Thank you.
So now finally, I'm glad they got you at Pace, okay, and got you over here. Now, so what are some of the responsibilities you had at Walmart and Sam's?
It was interesting because they had a policy, Walmart, Sam's Club did at the time, that unless you were in merchandising, you could not be hired as a vice president in the company. And I'd been a senior vice president at Pace. So it was a big gulp to take. Say, I'm going to come in and start as a senior director.
Right.
But that was what was required. And I certainly could see the future and the potential anyway.
Right.
So I came in to HR at Sam's Club, within 90 days, promoted to a vice president. Built that field organization. Coleman Peterson was on the Walmart side, and I was on the Sam's Club side. We were the first two, I'll call profession of human resource leaders that had ever been brought into the company. Mr. Sam felt like that was everybody's job to be great HR leaders.
Right.
But we had evolved, and there were external pressures and a real need to build up the HR function. So he built out the field function. I built out the field function at Sam's. And, shortly thereafter, 3 years, the woman who I was reporting to, Suzanne, Suzanne made the decision that she was going to leave. Her name is Suzanne Wade now, but it was Suzanne Alford.
Right. Yeah. I remember
and
Suzanne
I was
really
shocked because I just thought she'd be
So
in the organization for a long time. Well, she's doing great in San Antonio, Texas. She went to go work for HEB, but it opened up that spot. And I'll never forget when Joe Harden called me and said, we'd like to promote you to Senior Vice President of Membership Marketing and Logistics. And I said, what do I know about that? And his answer was, I'll teach you what you need to know about those disciplines. You bring great leadership skills. And that's really what we're looking for. Such a great compliment and opened up a huge opportunity. So was Senior Vice President of Membership Marketing Logistics at Sam's. After 2 years, I got promoted to Executive Vice President of Membership Marketing at Sam's. And I was the first female Executive Vice President in the corporation.
I remember that.
Do you?
Yeah,
really?
I do. Congratulations on that. I know I've told you that earlier, but I thought it was so phenomenal. That Walmart was really recognizing the talent. And, that's when Walmart really began to focus on diversity. Such a great thing. And now, you look at the company and it's phenomenal.
It is. That's right.
Yeah. The women, the men, the people that are leading today, so you really got that started. You said a great example. You did.
Feeling.
I actually, in my notes, I have that. I went, Celia broke the glass ceiling. So you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
It was my honor and pleasure. And just, I'm thrilled with how the company has really grown. It's women leadership and it's diversity in leadership.
That's right.
Yep.
Well, you'll get to know Celia a lot more through this podcast. And we're going to talk a lot about, and she'll be sharing many more ideas and her role, her responsibilities, and there's so much to talk about. But why don't we sort of give our viewers and listeners a broad brush here for a moment? Then we're going to dive into our very first segment. And then again, the overarching umbrella here is servant leadership, and that's broad.
Yes.
We're going to get into that. And I will tell you what we're going to do. In this podcast and each podcast that we do, that you will be able to learn a few things or be reminded of a few things that you can take back and implement today.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Absolutely.
That's our goal here, isn't it?
It sure is, Andy.
Because we said, let's don't get up there. Let's take things that you can apply today to be a better leader, be a better manager. So we're going to give you that. Together we are. So Celia is my co-host, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to do at least 6 of these over the course of a period of time.
Thrilled.
And so we'll break it all down for you, and each 6 will have a title, and then underneath that title will be some great learning for all of us. And so we'll get into all that. I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too, Andy. Thank you for this honor.
Yeah, well, thank you. And so you'll learn a lot more about Celia, because I want to come back. She's very, very involved in our community here in Northwest Arkansas and other things. You'll get to hear about that. Check her out on LinkedIn. And again, thank you so much for being here. So Celia, let's jump into it. Okay. So what we want to do is give you an introduction to this podcast series. Okay. And so we're going to do that. And so let's talk about servant leadership. And so Celia, why did we name it? Why did we? Because we went on not different names.
We did. That's right.
So let's talk about why we chose to name this podcast Servant Leadership. So what is your definition of it? Let's talk about the definition here of servant leadership.
Yeah. I think to me, servant leadership is about putting yourself second, but putting the team and the people that you represent and serve, putting them first with a perspective and a point of view of how can you lift them up? How can you develop them so that they can achieve their fullest potential in your work environment? Leadership is not defined by some title or by, you get anointed such, level in your organization. It's really defined by your followers.
Right.
If people don't want to follow you and don't believe that you have their best interests at heart, you may have the title, but you're not really a great leader.
Right.
And that's what I think servant leadership is all about.
You're so correct. And, one of the things that I know when we were visiting about this, and you kept using this word over and over, you talked about fellowship. I remember, and I'm going to date myself here, but, we all listen and hear great leaders in our past and we remember things. I remember I was so young at Walmart at the time. I was in my 20s. But I remember our former president, Jack Shoemaker. Yeah. And I remember at one of our year beginning meetings, he stood up and he talked about fellowship. And he went into depth. And I was a young assistant manager at the time. And I remember he taught the importance of fellowship. And I never heard him that referred to in the past that was really servant leadership.
Yes.
Talk about that. What's that say to you when you hear that word fellowship?
Well, I think it's first about a leader who people aspire to be on their team.
Right.
A leader who has a vision, who has the intellect, and the charismatic personality, to gather others together, to have a vision for what they want to accomplish, but understand that they don't accomplish it themselves, that they accomplish it through others.
Right.
And then they can instill this, inspired vision in others and then break down the barriers so that vision can be accomplished and it can be molded and enhanced.
Right.
And then they celebrate the success of that. Along the way, their behavior is always modeling the way.
Yeah. You're so right. And of course, we had great men and women around us at Walmart that taught us or set the example of fellowship, of really serving others. We've seen that we've seen that lived out.
Yes, we
day
did.
in and day out. And some of the things I thought about too around this whole leadership, the servant leadership is, they would ask us what needs to be done, and then we would collaborate around that idea. I remember, you do too. The officer meetings on Friday when Sam and Don and David and all those. We would gather in the auditorium and we'd all talk about our week, where we've been, what stores, what clubs, whatever. We would share what we've done all week. And then we'd have an issue. And then I remember, Sam or someone would say, okay, what needs to be done? Question mark.
Right.
We collaborate, get the best ideas, and then, but it was always what was right for the company or the customer, wasn't it?
The customer. That's exactly right. What was right for the customer.
Yeah.
And then how with integrity did we tackle that?
Right.
So it was also right for the company.
Right. So I think as you think about this, so servant leadership, fellowship, first of all, it's been asking the right questions into that, then getting input, collaboration around it, and then developing that action plan.
Right.
Now, here was the thing that was, as you know, we did this every Friday, is that then we would take that action plan and we would do it, we would develop that day and then communicate it that day.
Right. Exactly.
And then probably action was taken that day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what servant leadership, that's fellowship is this. We didn't just take it and push it out. We collaborated around it. We talked about it. We were all on the same page of thinking.
Yeah. And everybody rallied around it.
Yeah.
And one of the great, secrets, I guess, of Walmart, I would say, is speed to execution.
Mm-hmm.
And exactly to your point, it was a germ of an idea based on a question that then got developed over the course of maybe an hour's period of time with all the feedback. Yeah. And then decisions were made on, okay, how are we going to make this happen? And how are we going to communicate it to all? Then,
good.
Two other things I'd say about servant leadership. I learned it from Don Soderquist and David Glass.
Right.
I joined after Mr. Sam had passed away.
Right.
So I didn't ever get to see him in action, but boy, I could feel his spirit.
Oh, I know.
I knew I was here at Walmart and Sam's Club because I wanted to add to the culture.
Right.
But it's about being humble and vulnerable.
Right.
But it's also about making tough decisions.
Yes.
So servant leadership isn't soft.
It isn't, and we need to get into that. What it's not. I agree with that. I want to say one thing to our guest. I had the opportunity to be the president CEO of the Soderquist Center for Leadership and Ethics, and actually launched it with Don Soderquist.
Yeah.
I spent almost 7 years there. I'm going to come back because I spent hours and hours with Don Soderquist, one-on-one. What a second career for me, and I have so many notes.
Yes.
And we traveled globally together, and we'll get into that. And some of my learning, sitting on a plane or a train with him for hours, flying somewhere or on a train going across Japan, wherever we were, and just leaning into his knowledge.
Yes.
And we're going to come back to that.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's coming in another podcast. I promise you. We're going to get to that. All right. Now, Celia, I think you brought up a good point. From a standpoint of servant leadership, what is it not?
Well, first of all, it's not saying yes to everybody and every idea. It's this ability to discern, and to gather and collaborate people's points of view.
Right.
It's also about clarity. That quite honestly, being unclear is unkind. Being very clear about what you're asking of yourself and of your followers. And then it's not being arrogant.
Right.
Confident's different than arrogance.
Yeah, right.
And, I could tell many stories about moments in time where my arrogance would come out. Right. And I was humbled in a flash, going, okay, that's why that's not at the top of the leadership characteristics. Right. It's this confidence, but, humility.
Right.
And they don't rest on their past successes. Servant leaders are constantly trying to better themselves and better others around them.
Right.
And so striving to learn about things they don't know or be in the middle of, finding the right solution for that situation.
Like it. Yes. And, I think it's something servant leadership is not a yes person, as you said earlier. I think you're right. That's critical. And that, I am going to close our podcast a bit later, and I'm going to talk about humility, because I remember those conversations with some of the people you mentioned. Quite frankly, the conversations I had with them was, it wasn't ever threatening, but it was, this is the way we're going to do things. And it was about humility.
Yes.
And it was about listening because, when I became an officer at Walmart, I think I was 29 years old. And I will tell you, I got arrogant. Now that was corrected quickly as soon as my leader seen it, heard it, felt it, and it should have been
right
because I just didn't know. I thought, okay, this is going to be, and then I went down the wrong track. I was quickly explained how I needed to behave.
Mhm.
It was some of the best lessons ever. So as a leader, your responsibility to the people that do report to you and it's part of your team is to guide them,
Yes.
help them. It's tough love,
Right.
you know?
That's the great phrase to
Yeah,
use.
it is. And I am so glad that I had people around me that was honest with me,
Mhm.
that coached me, that guided me in those early days. They were developing me.
Yep.
And if you don't do that to the people around you to coach, teach, and develop, they could get off and they could fail.
Mhm.
And part of our responsibility as leaders is to help our people not to fail,
Right.
to be successful, right? And
One of the best servant leaders I ever had the opportunity to work with was Mike Duke.
oh yeah,
So
yeah,
Mike Duke would seem like
Yeah.
he was a soft, gentle,
right,
wise
Yeah.
soul, and he is all of that.
yes,
But he chose to mentor me
Mhm.
when I was leading logistics at
Mhm.
Sam's,
Mhm.
and he was tough as nails.
hmm
And it was tough love. Like
Mhm.
if you weren't there right on time with an agenda, you
right,
didn't get to extend your time with him.
right,
If it was a 30-minute meeting, man, you were done at 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And he was giving you all those signals at about
Yeah.
30 seconds
Yeah.
before 30 minutes were
Yeah,
over.
yeah.
And boom, you're
Yeah.
done.
yeah,
You didn't maximize your
Right.
opportunity with him
right,
if you weren't totally prepared, if you didn't use those 30 minutes the
Mhm.
way you needed
Mhm.
to get the perspective that you needed
Right.
from him.
right,
And then there were several conversations
Right.
where he would say, you need to polish up this,
Mhm.
or here's how I observed
Mhm.
you in
Mhm.
that particular meeting.
Mm.
And here's my perspective on how
Right.
that could have gone better. He was all about lifting me up, but
Right.
he could give me that hard
Yeah.
feedback.
right.
And that's the definition of a servant leader.
It is. It is. And it really is. And and as servant leaders, as leaders, I think we are also taught that it is a lifelong process.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, you just never get there, but the joy of it is the learning.
Mm.
The joy of it is the teaching. The joy of it is helping someone that on your team be even more successful.
Right.
And maybe even someday taking over your responsibility.
Yes.
You know,
Grooming people to be able to
developing,
do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Love it. But we also talked about just the responsibility of it.
Mm.
So yeah, I want something else I want to share with our audience today is this. I want to share your book.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
And tell us about this book.
Yeah.
Okay.
I never intended to write a book,
Mm-hmm.
but one of my external coaches had said to me when I was going between Sam's Club and
Mhm.
making the decision whether I was going to join Walmart on
Mhm.
the Walmart side. He said, you know what? You really need to write a book. And I said, oh, forget it. But he introduced me to
Yeah.
Tammy Kling, who's my ghostwriter.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this is very nice. You're wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
And no intention to write it. And then I made the decision to retire
Mm-hmm.
in 2016 with that 26 years. And I always know it's a God thing, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Because it was 2 days after my retirement when all of a sudden there are crickets. No one, your email box is not blowing
Yeah,
up. No one's
right.
calling you.
Right.
You're not like in demand.
Right.
And Tammy Kling calls me and says, are you ready to write that book yet?
Mm-hmm.
And I went, what? How would you even know? I hadn't kept her informed.
Right.
She didn't
Right.
know where I was in my stage of life. And I said, well, okay, yes,
Mhm.
let's talk about it. And just through conversation, we
Mhm.
laid it out. And I thought,
Mm.
this is an important book to write.
Right.
And it really is about servant leadership
Awesome.
and the practical ways that you can
Mm-hmm.
navigate through life and
Mm.
leadership.
I love it's gracious and strong.
Thank
Wow.
you.
That's such a powerful. And how to rise above the unexpected left turns of life and leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What do you get? Where can you get this?
Well, you can get it. I hate to say this on Amazon, but
I knew you were going to say that.
I really tried, Andy, not to put my book at Amazon because I was just anyway.
Okay,
I'm Walmart Blue.
Let's
all
call
the
it
way.
that Seattle company.
Yeah,
all right,
that's Seattle company. That's exactly right. Or you can order it on my website, which is CeliaSwanson.com.
Okay, and of course we'll have all that information about Celia posted on our website, Doing Business in Bentonville, so you can easily access her and find all the stuff, great stuff about her out. Now, Celia, what we want to do now is just a couple things, and we just give just a broad overview of servant leadership. Now, as I mentioned earlier in our podcast, we're going to get deep here. Okay, in the next segments, we're going to really get in this application process of servant leadership and the things you can take and implement or learn that day, that moment of the podcast, and then apply it with your team. Okay, so we're going to do that in the future, but I would like to do two things. I would like to tell a quick story because I think stories, first of all, this is how we learn. We learn and remember stories, don't we? And of course, you and I were able to grow up as we talked about, and we heard a lot of great stories.
Yes, we
right?
did. Yeah.
And, and they help us adapt to change. They help us to find who we are. And the story I'm going to close with today, then once I tell the story, we're going to come back and give you a sort of outline of what's coming on the podcast. But, this story shaped me as a leader, and I'm going to be very transparent with you because I think servant leadership is about transparency. And so I think it's just really important that we do that. I think I was maybe 30 years old by this point.
Okay.
Okay. But I was regional vice president at Walmart, and I was in charge of some southern states. So we back then were having re-grand openings of the Walmart discount stores, and we weren't quite yet into the super centers. But I got a call one day from Mr. Sam's assistant, Becky, and Becky asked me a question. She said, "Hey, Andy, are you going to the re-grand opening of a Walmart in Baton Rouge, Louisiana?" I said, "Absolutely." She said, "Great." I went, well, like, why is she calling me? Number one. Secondly, I said, she said, "Great." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "Mr. Sam's going and you can go with him." Now, here's a little backstory. No one wanted to travel with Sam.
Fly with Sam.
Yeah, because he flew his own plane. Right. He was a pilot. And just didn't want to do that. And well, she sort of tricked me. And later we talked, Becky and I became great friends and close. But, she's like, "But, you're going to have to go with him." So we arranged everything, and I showed up at the Rogers Airport at Walmart FBO, and we were going to leave at 6 a.m. I got there at 5:30 a.m. and Sam was already there. His truck, who, if you're ever here in Northwest Arkansas, it stays at the museum, but it's now at the Northwest Arkansas Airport because of the remodeled museum. But that's the truck was sitting there, and so I went, "Dang, I'm already late." I'm traveling with the chairman and I'm late, and I felt late. So I rushed in and to the FBO there, so unfortunately it was just he and I that day because it was a day trip, and maybe Becky couldn't get other people to join. I don't know. But so I climbed into the plane in the co-pilot seat.
Oh my God.
Okay. Now he was the pilot. So, he did everything. We took off and we headed south. So we climbed to the altitude. I'm not sure what it was back then because I was new at all this flying and stuff on the company planes. And so he had the headphones on. He took the headphones on and he turned the speaker on so we could hear the controllers, right? Well, again, I'm sitting over there. Now, I had prepped for this trip. I talked to all my buddies. I said, "What will Sam ask me?" And I was ready. I knew all the financials. I knew everything. I had memorized it. I mean, I stayed up on this, right? I mean, you were the chairman. So he looks over at me and he looks right and he says, I will be back in a moment. Now, I don't know about you, but when there's two people in an airplane and the pilot says he's going to be back, you wonder where the pilot's going.
It's a little space in there.
So he goes to the back and gets his briefcase and he rambles through it and finally, thank the Lord. I think I prayed the whole time.
Yeah.
And he came back up and he sat down. And so he looked over at me and he said, okay, now where are we going on the stores? And we walked through the locations. And so he said, okay, so I knew the stores. So the first question then he said, Andy, he said, okay, tell me about the store manager, and I said, okay, man, my memory kicked in. I started talking sales. I talked expenses, profitability. I talked about the area, the store, and he stopped me about halfway into my speech I had memorized, and for him, because I knew he was going to ask that question, he said, "That's not my question."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Tell me about the store manager," and I didn't know anything about him.
Oh.
I didn't know his personal life. I didn't know if he had a spouse. I didn't know if he had children. I didn't know, and I knew his background and things like that. But that's not the question.
Right. Right.
And I went, this is going to be a long day. He asked me the second question was the next store manager. He asked me the same question.
Mm.
At that point, I thought, okay, honesty here has got to overrule.
Right.
And I said, Mr. Sam, I really don't know about these individuals. And so, and he and I thought, okay, when do we land? When can I get out of this airplane? When can we get to the store? I need to, because I'm young, nervous, and realize that I have missed the most important thing here. He was wanting to know about the individual, and that's, and so that's lesson one. Okay. Now, so we landed, and we borrowed a car at the airport. We drove into town and we went to Kmart. We went, we looked at the competition. We went to the stores. We had a great time. I mean, we visited 4 stores that day. It was a long, long day.
Yeah.
Okay. But what learning we had, we talked to customers. I mean, it was just a great experience. So we landed back that evening in Rogers, and Sam got in his truck. He shook my hand, thanked me, and he drove off. And I walked inside the FBO. And what I'm going to share with you is my thoughts. I wrote these thoughts down that evening sitting in the FBO because I got to spend up close all day with the chairman of Walmart. And here's what I learned as a young leader, and it changed my life. Okay. And that's what happens with stories. They tend to do that. So number one, I learned that humility is not a weakness.
Right. Exactly.
It's not a weakness. It's a quiet strength. I seen that strength all day up close. When he would walk up to our associates and thank them and talk to them and listen and take out that tape recorder and say, hey, I'm standing here with Mary in this department, this store number, and she's got this great idea. And then Mary would get a phone call the next day from whoever was responsible saying, hey, Mr. Sam said you had an idea. Can you explain that to me? What followed through?
Yeah.
What do you think Mary did? She probably went home and told her family about that.
Exactly right.
But that humility. The second thing I learned that day, Celia, was that ego, and this is my learning, not Sam's learning, but ego destroys everything and everyone in its path.
Yes.
You got to keep the ego in check. I learned that day because I mentioned earlier I got off on the wrong foot. That day, I seen at that time the richest man in America didn't have ego. If he did, he kept it in check.
Right.
And that's my point here. And the third thing I learned is that ask the right questions. And the only way to know the right questions is to know your business and know your customers. Sam was able to ask the right question because he studied his business so much, didn't he?
He did, yes.
He understood retail. He understood those small towns back then.
Mm-hmm.
He understood that customer perspective and about keeping that price low. And he would work on all of us to negotiate to keep that price low, but the other thing I think he learned, Celia, was that he listened so well to everyone. That's how he knew so much about the business. Mm-hmm. He listened. Mm-hmm. I heard him listen all day.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then the last thing I would say is that I learned that day is how he united people and ideas. He would hear a great idea and he then would make that, he would get that tape recorder out and he'd record it. And then next day, somebody with alphabet beside their name or behind their name would call that person and say, Sam said you had a great idea. Mm-hmm. Think about how you unite people like that.
Well, and talk about developing followership, which was the topic a little bit earlier.
Right.
Who wouldn't want to stay and fight and, work through challenges if Mr. Sam recognized that you had a great idea?
So this whole thing about servant leadership that we're going to do, Celia and I are going to do, I will tell you, it's going to be such great reminders of us, the things we live. And we're so excited to share with you what we've learned, the good, the bad, the mistakes we've made. But our commitment to you, our audience, is to really together, let's become great leaders together. Let's become servants.
Yes.
Let's do this, And so, Celia, I'm so excited about this.
Oh, I'm thrilled, Andy. I again, just through different stories, the lessons that we learned and how to apply that matter. They matter. That's what you'll find in my book, but that's what you're also going to find in this podcast series.
Okay, so the second podcast that we're going to do is to find your unique value proposition. Quickly, give us an example of that, Celia.
When I joined Sam's Club, I knew exactly why they needed me. Mm-hmm. And it gave me great confidence and ability to influence pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. My model was study the culture for the first 90 days. Yeah. Listen, ask questions.
Good.
Just really, I wanted to come into a culture that was thriving.
Right.
Versus having to change it, which was my past experience. Right. And then at 90 days, I knew how to operate within that great culture, but I also knew I had some unique skills that no one else in the corporation had at that point in time. Right. And those skills actually were labor relations skills. Right. And I knew what to do. Mm-hmm. I was equipped, and all of a sudden we had a labor relations challenge at Sam's Club.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, the person who was my greatest advocate at that point in time was David Glass.
All right.
And I just then could stay in my lane. I knew what I was bringing to the company. I executed with excellence on that. I wasn't afraid to ask for what I needed to get, done what needed to be done. And then it bought me time once people could, because again, I'm a professional HR person. Why do we need that?
Right.
And then we navigated successfully through this labor relations issue. Yeah. Bought me great credibility and time to then kind of steep in the culture, learn how to be effective and excellent at Walmart. And that's my point about defining your unique value proposition. Right. Nobody can take that away from you, but you got to know what it is in order to thrive in it and shine.
We're gonna get deep in that in
Yep.
podcast 2. You'll enjoy that segment. And then we're going to talk about leading with grace in podcast 3.
And that's based on the Gracious and Strong title,
Yeah.
which
There.
I never would have
Yeah.
come up with that title. But when I was
Yeah.
retired and I'm
Yeah.
starting into my board work, a person that I was being interviewed
Mhm.
by, I kind of wasn't pleased with where I thought the conversation was going. And I kind of said, why would you guys be the ones that I want to be out there marketing for me? And the woman said, because I know you. And I said, you do? And she said, I worked at Sam's Club and I was in the audience in all those meetings. And you went through some tough periods. And the way I would describe you is gracious and strong.
I love that.
I was humbled.
Yeah.
I was, thrilled. And it became very evident that was what the title of the book should be.
I love that. The power of purpose. We're going to get into that. Now, I can't wait to dive into that. I know because we're gonna really get in there. I know around values and things like that. Right?
Exactly right. Aligning your values to those of the organization or the leader that you follow.
And at Soderquist Center, we really got into the values piece. It was really critical on our assessments that we did with organizations and individuals. And wow, we have a lot to say about that.
We do. Yep.
Then rising above the unexpected left turns of life and leadership. Here we go. Back to the book.
And they're often and they come when they're least expected.
Well, we all have those.
Yes.
And so we'll definitely get into that. And then leading a high performing team.
Yes.
Wow. That will be really good.
And I think, there's a lot of science behind that.
Yes.
But again, it's leading a high performance team.
Well, I want to encourage our audience to commit to be on this journey with us. It will be a journey. I'll guarantee you that you will learn from this. We may even have a special guest or two along the way, but I can't tell you how excited, Celia Swanson, I am to be with you.
Thank you,
to this
Andy.
journey together.
Mutual.
And to our listeners and viewers, thank you so much. We're very, very excited that you're going to join us on this. Cecilia, thank you for the day.
Oh, my pleasure, Andy.
Okay.
We're referencing back to all these lessons and stories, and it just warms my heart.
I know
that we can share this with others for the purpose of helping them be the best that they can be.
Well, again, Celia Swanson, Andy Wilson, we thank you for joining us today. Again, you can check us out on Doing Business in Bentonville. You can check us out on Celia's her website, and we'll make sure you have that information. Also, there will be articles posted along the way around servant leadership. So look forward to seeing those on our website, Doing Business in Bentonville. You can communicate with us as d@dbbnwa.com. This podcast is on our website. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple. It's on YouTube. It will be on Celia's website. So it's going to be out there.
Yeah.
So for all of you. So again, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. This is just so exciting to be here with you. And we look forward to the next time. Celia, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone.